getting close to Manon Correctional Facility. That's it. All right. Stop here to sign in. No guns allowed. Sometimes they send the dogs out to sniff. So I like to be facing this way.
I leave my stuff in here?
Yep, you're gonna leave everything in there, take everything out your pockets, metal, keys.
You been good out there, boy?
Yeah.
You been good out there?
Yeah.
I work with him and other kids at the school. I had made a promise to him that I was going to make sure he would get the opportunity to see you.
Appreciate it.
I'm going to step out the way and give you all a moment so you can talk to each other since you haven't seen each other in over 8 years. Okay?
You should have a lot to talk about.
I do, but I just been nervous.
Well, coming down here?
Heck yeah.
You should have a lot to talk about what you've been doing for the last 8 years.
Playing ball, getting in trouble often, like fighting every day sometimes.
You gotta stay out of trouble.
There be a lot of police walking through here.
This is jail. This is a max penitentiary. You know, you got people with rape, murders, all this down. Everything you can name, they in this joint. And you don't, it's crazy now. It's not a good place to be because anything liable to happen. Somebody might come out of the cell and feel some type of way, style you, anything. Anything liable to happen down here.
So they be stabbing people down with forks and stuff? Y'all get metal forks to eat with?
No, we don't get no metal forks. They got plastic forks. But anything liable to happen.
How did you get in here?
I got a murder and attempt murder. You know what that is, right?
You killed somebody and you tried to kill somebody.
You know how much time I got, right?
Yeah.
How much?
Life.
Yeah, you can say that though, but I got like 60 years. You can say life.
That's a long time.
I'm still in court though. I'm still trying to get out though. It's possible though. I'm just still working on my case, trying to get out.
It is possible.
Yeah, it's possible.
That's all people say about me. I act just like you.
You can't. You don't want that though. You got to change, man. I'm locked up.
I'm calm now because I take medicine.
How you ain't up in Montefiore?
Got kicked out of Webster, fight the teachers and stuff.
That's assault.
He touched me first.
It don't matter. That's a grown up. You lucky you ain't go to jail for that. 'Cause I don't want nothing to happen to you. You see what happened on TV every day?
Yeah.
Little kids constantly getting killed.
There's stuff crazy in Chicago.
It is. So you got to stay in school, go to church, and play basketball. I don't want to turn to the news. They talk about you that got shot or something because you want to hang on a corner. You got to listen to your mama.
I do this to Mama kind though when she.
You got to listen to her. She ain't going to tell you nothing wrong.
Yeah, true.
Because you don't want to end up in a situation like this. She tell you something and you went out there and got yourself in some trouble trying to buy some Jordans or something. It ain't worth it.
Now, that's just part of a 12-minute film. Now, all of us sitting here, that can't help but touch you. You think that you lead a criminal life. We were just talking about, both of you have been in prison, 13 years and nearly 20 with Victor. And you can imagine sitting there facing life. And you have to talk to your son about, what this life is all about. And how do you face your child that's doing stuff just like you did? And knowing that, the possibilities he might wind up where he is. And how many other stories are like that?
Introduction.
Yeah. Okay. And I'm just setting it up because both of you are dealing with, this show is about second chances. And Victor Tate, you're with Second Chances working on a NAN, and Johnny Perez, you're advocate for against solitary confinement. So I just showed you this opening piece, which neither one of you has seen, just to give an illustration of, I want to see how you will react to it. And just give us your take. Just start with you, Johnny. Tell us who you are and what you do and how you responded to this clip that I showed.
So, like you said, I'm an advocate. I advocate for a number of different causes, one of them being solitary confinement. I also connect people with services who are returning from prison and jails with a number of different services. I think when we look at the video and we see, what stands out the most was the child's amazement about, why can you actually get 60 years, for this kind of crime. And I see, the first word that comes to my mind is mass incarceration. I see that.
You see yourself?
No, I say the first word that comes to my mind when I see that video, when I was watching it, was mass incarceration. The incarceration of an entire group of people. Not only that, but multi-generational. You have the father, you have the son, and if the son keeps going, then his son will also end up in there. And I also try to think about solutions. How do we prevent that from happening? Can we attack that on an individual choice, or is it more of a systemic approach that we need to happen in order to keep black males out of prison, which, according to the New York Times, there's about 3 million black males that are missing from our communities.
Well, it's a lack of education, a lack of resources, and as in the two cases we have right in front of us, let's give this Victor.
Well,
what's your take on the little clip?
Well, for myself, it really brung up something for me. Feeling, I sort of like, felt what the father felt. Tears was coming out of his eyes, and he's sitting there, and here is his seed, and he's feeling, I can tell he's somewhat feeling helpless and hopeless, being in the circumstances that he is faced with, knowing that he's
embarrassed.
Yeah, 60 years, being out of his son's life for his formative years. And it's painful, because I could see the pain on his face for, first of all, being in the circumstances that he is in, and also not being able to be there with his son to help guide him along his years in maturity, to teach him and to keep him out of the target zone of the possibility of him also winding up where he is. And for me, it brings up a vision of when I was incarcerated and I was in Attica. And my son was a arm baby. I think he must have been about maybe about 11 months, 10 months or so. And you know, that was my first visit. And just the thought of me seeing my son not being able to be in his life at his birth, right? And not being able to see him when he takes his first step, when he says his first words, and it was real hurtful for me. And I felt hopeless, and it was a lot of pain there, you know what I'm saying? Just knowing that I'm gonna be here for a while, and by the time I come home, he'll be walking and talking. And I will have had nothing to do with that. And it was a painful experience. And it really made me look inside myself and really become even more remorseful for the life that I had chosen, because I know I could have made better choices.
Okay.
You know,
Graham, from your standpoint, what do you think of the point that he broke down and cried? How many other guys just come out there cold and with a more macho stance? I mean, you know, with no shame.
for him to show those emotions in front of his son, it's good for his son to see that.
Okay.
It's not about trying to be a man.
Right.
You know, that hardcore stuff it's a ploy.
Okay.
It's not real.
Okay.
Everybody cries.
Right.
Everybody feels hurt and pain.
Right.
And I'm sure the boy was feeling pain, and he said he was scared, you know, just coming in there, and he was nervous.
But he was drugged up. He said he had been
But
taking.
he said he's taking medication for his
Yeah.
behavior, which is another scenario in unto itself with the system. But the fact that his father definitely is showing remorse, because he hadn't seen him in 8 years,
Right.
and he's got another 52 to go. All right, by that time, that boy will be an old man. So, you know, I've dealt with boys whose fathers are incarcerated. It took me to a meeting I was in at a school. There was a gentleman there from a halfway house, and his son was in the school, but his son was getting involved with the Bloods.
Yeah.
And I had talked with his son about it. And then the father came to the school. He got permission to come to the school. And we're sitting talking to his son. And he said, son, I don't want you to wind up where I've been. He said, I have to get permission. I have to ask somebody for permission to come see about my own son.
Right.
He said, you're my son. And I don't have, as a father, I don't have the right or the capability to come and deal with you when needed. I have to get permission from somebody. He said, you don't ever want to ask another man for permission to go see about your child. And we had a few sessions. Regretfully, the boy still chose to join the gang. A couple weeks later, he's all busted up, cut up, beat up, and didn't have the inkling to even say, this is not for me. And I could see the frustration in the father, because his son was on a path, probably worse than the path that he took, because running with the gang, he's not going to live long.
Right.
You know? And there were young guys that I've talked to and warned them, and they wound up dead in a matter of weeks. So this is a factor. For whatever reason, if your father is missing, that's a hurt. My father died when I was 4. It's 60 some odd years ago. That's a hurt. And whether your father walked out on you, or your father is deceased, or he's in prison, that's a hurt. And it's a consistent hurt. So it's something that you don't get over, really, if he's not there. You don't get over it. The clip is very touching.
Yeah.
But there is a degree of naivete, I think, that the boy has with the scenario, because I don't think it's really hit him at that point just how dire a situation his father is in. But he is telling him, you know, you need to go to school. You need to listen to your mother.
Right.
You need to go to church. Don't
Right.
fight with the teacher, because
Right.
that's assault. You know, he's giving him
Yeah.
good advice.
Setting
So
up
to
systems
see
of
the
discipline.
spiritual energy is seeping in there. You see a priest brought him to prison because he's counseling the kid. He's showing him. I love the clip. I thought it was perfect for the situation, because I especially want to see how you two would respond to it, because we're basically talking about being in prison and going even further, solitary confinement, which is actually the next clip that we're going to play. I'll give you a few minutes. Let's talk a little bit about this solitary confinement. Once you're in prison, then you act up, you know, and then they throw you in a different place. And what is the psychological effect on the mind when you're in a hole 24/7?
What merits solitary confinement? Can you tell?
And that's a real important point you bring up. So solitary is a box within a box, because you've already been removed from society, but then to be removed from the general population and placed in a situation where you are completely isolated. And it's supposed to be 23 hours, and 23 hours a day with 1 hour of recreation. But in practice, the way that it works, especially in Rikers Island, is that people are confined for an entire 24 hours, just like you said, because you have to be fully dressed up and standing up at your door in order to sign up for recreation at 5 o'clock in the morning.
Right.
What people don't know also is that the light stays on all night, so it's difficult for you to get any kind of sleep.
The light stays on?
Yeah, the light stays on all night for security reasons, because they have to see that you are still alive, and the guard, when he walks, he has to see flesh. So if you get creative and decide to put your head underneath the blanket, you'll be waking up every hour on the hour to prove that you are alive and or did not escape.
Have you been through solitary confinement?
Yeah, I spent 3 years in solitary.
How much?
3.
3 years?
The longest collectively.
3 years?
The longest stint being 10 months, yeah. And when you talk about what merits, right? Why does a person land in solitary? There's a host of different reasons why people land there, but most of them are nonviolent. 85% of the people in solitary confinement are there for nonviolent reasons.
And what was
Maybe
the
they have
reason?
too much property. Maybe they've tested positive.
What was your reason?
My reason, well, a number of reasons. I tested positive for marijuana a few times, and I've also gotten into plenty of fights while I was incarcerated due to me not having any gang affiliation. People would not be surprised to believe that gangs run a lot of the prisons. And not formal gangs, how we know Bloods and Crips, but sometimes people just being together may behave as if they're in a gang. So you might have Muslims all together, the Christians all together, you might have the white guys all together, the Spanish guys are together, the black guys are together. So although they're not a gang per se.
What did they tell you? You're Spanish and black. I mean,
yeah. But also the guys who don't fit anywhere, they also group up, And we talk about associations and all of that. We gravitate towards people that are like us in some way.
Okay.
And the same happens in prison, but it's so segregated. I mean, you can walk into the mess hall, or the cafeteria and see where you should be sitting at and where you should not be sitting at, and you will be, you'll feel it. But getting back to why people placed in solitary, people testing positive for marijuana or any host of drugs, excessive property. There have been instances where people have had excessive stamps, because they might sell their artwork, or they might cut hair, or they might shine shoes real good, and stamps and cigarettes are the currency inside, penal institutions.
Stamps and cigarettes.
Yeah, that's currency. You can exchange that for. Well, we go back to the barter system,
Right.
And I'm sure Victor can add on to this as far as it's important to recognize that once you're in solitary, because the sentences are already excessive, but once any misbehavior report that you receive while in solitary only leads to more solitary time. Even if that initial misbehavior report wouldn't lead you to solitary in the first place. So how does that look at in practice? So someone can go for 90 days for testing positive for marijuana, but end up in there for 4, 5, 6, 7 years for receiving misbehavior reports while he was there.
All right, my next question is, how did you keep your sanity? You seem so sane now.
Yeah, I have
worked
been out long
He
enough.
worked on that.
Oh, I
No, he
didn't see
worked
you
on
back
that.
then. Oh, okay.
Yeah, I will say that I've had these discussions enough time to tell you that I am the exception to the rule. I am not like most people. Generally,
Go through 3 years.
yeah, I mean, there's been people that spent 20, 30 years, in solitary, and what kept me sane, is hope. Not wanting to give in to the people that want to see you fail for a number of reasons, whether it was
God
a
have anything to do
prosecutor,
with
the arresting officer. Absolutely,
Okay.
absolutely. We find strength in when we're stronger than what we think that we are until we're faced with a situation in which we have to be strong. Number two, sometimes other people believe in us more than we believe in ourselves.
Okay.
So if we don't want to make it through for ourselves, we make it through for my daughter, who was born 2 days before I got arrested. And my mother, who, came and dragging 35 pounds of food, 10 hours away, And sometimes you just find solace in your higher power and say, you know what, I don't know what's going on, but I really need you to get me through this because I need to make it home for the people that love me.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's for sure.
So how did you wind up incarcerated?
I was convicted of armed robbery to first degree in 2000. I was 21 years old, and I've been released now for about a year and a half, since September of 2013. What helped me out was I discovered education while incarcerated, but we can talk about that at some other time.
Okay. So you managed, I thought they were taking college out of the prison.
Yes,
They have.
They have.
They have.
Yeah.
But you were in, when did they do that?
That was
Recently?
no 1994.
Yeah, it's been a while. I don't know
1994,
the
Well, how
exact
did you
year.
get an education in
Programs out.
prison?
So what happened was what they canceled was so the prison itself used to offer college to people in prison. They employed college professors and things like that.
Oh,
so
good.
what's different now is that if a college ends up with a good enough relationship with the prison outside of so if the college comes in, they can volunteer their own services to the people in prison.
Okay.
But they have to worry about their own budgeting and their accrediting, so on and so forth. So I was fortunate enough to land in Mount McGregor Correctional Facility in Medium in Wilton, New York, and Siena College was the professors were volunteering their own time, energy, books, everything to come in and say we want to educate these men because we believe in the transformative power of education.
So you're telling me that you're the exception from the norm,
I am, unfortunately, yes. According to the statistics, yeah.
and you obtained your education, a level of education, while you were incarcerated.
Yes.
And now that you're out, you're not a recidivist.
No,
You're working
yes. I have 2 jobs.
2 jobs. So how important is education?
Education is, if it's not the most important, it's one of the most important.
No, it's the,
And studies show you time and time again how it reduces the recidivism and how it, I mean, we could talk about the fiscal aspect, saves money because it's reduced crime, so on and so forth. But deeper than that, it allows the person, the individual, the person who is in that cell to see opportunities where before they only saw challenges. So they see stepping stones before they saw barriers because now, because of an education, my mind opens up. I can be a doctor. I can be an architect.
Okay.
I can be all of the things that I was told that I could not be.
what went through your
Yeah.
mind when you were in solitary confinement? I'm sure you're fortunate to have a wife, a child, a mother, and all these loved ones. That love energy kept you alive, obviously.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of that wasn't consistent throughout my incarceration, except for my mother.
Okay.
Because when you're doing a long stretch, and
Yeah,
Rick probably
of course.
can testify to this, is that people fade in and out. Life goes on.
That's right.
Life doesn't stop just because my life, stopped and I'm incarcerated.
That's right.
And I remember I was the head of the household. I removed myself from society. Now, my girl is the head of the household. So she has to take care of all the bills that we couldn't make ends meet in the first place, hence one of the reasons I was robbing people in the first place.
Right.
But then, now there is the added expense of having your loved one incarcerated, because we're talking phone bills.
Phone bill, yeah.
Right, which used to cost about $30 for half an hour, but now they're regulating
$30
that.
for half an
Yes, when I went upstate, it was exactly $28 for 30 minutes.
Was it
30-minute phone call.
Comcast? Who
Yes.
had it? Comcast had the
Yeah,
exploitation
had
process.
all of the contracts for
Yes.
all of the state correctional
Right.
facilities.
That was a big
That's correct.
scam.
Absolutely. So we have the added phone bill, we have the packages, we have the commissary money. Then we have the added cost of even trying to visit somebody
Back
who's
and
been
forth,
10 hours away, because I'm next to Canada in Malone County, and I can see Canada from the yard, you know?
Really?
So it's $200-300 every time she comes to visit me.
So the whole family is incarcerated while you're incarcerated. And the expense and the economics that go along with being incarcerated becomes so overwhelming. And I've known people's families to become homeless as a result of their incarceration, them not being able to add economic to the family dynamics and the family, you know, diverting money to go up to take that trip, as Johnny had pointed out, to take that 5-6 hour ride up there, you know, bringing food stuffs and, you know, money for the account and everything. So, you know, once you're incarcerated, you know, your whole family becomes incarcerated. But I'd just like to just touch briefly and recap on with regards to your question, Graham, about education. And I definitely know that for me, education was my key to me not going back, to me finally to come to the point in my life to say, I got something now that I didn't have before I came in. So part of my transformation, when I became incarcerated, I became educated, I became skilled. And for me, I just couldn't wait to get out to try this new stuff out. And to see if it really worked. Because
But you got the education in prison?
Part of it. I started it in prison and continued when I got out. And to wait till I get out to really apply these newly acquired skills in education to see if it really worked. Because I didn't know that it really worked. So everything that I had done to educate myself to develop a set of skill sets was for me to come out and try to see if it really worked. So when I was released and I was able to enter the workforce, and I seen that I was good at what I did, because I actually started in administrative. I was very good typist. I was good at doing office skills of filing. I knew everything. I had my certificates. You know, I actually had a secretarial science certificate, which is a little bit more than just office skills.
Right,
and I seen that I was good. I liked what I was doing, and I said, "Wow, this stuff really works." You know, so the education piece is key to the stopping the recidivism. And I think that, you know, with them taking education out of the facilities was the worst thing they could have ever done.
Now, how does it work nowadays, the educational system?
Oh, it doesn't exist unless you have a situation such as his, where you have a college or a university that's willing to partner with a facility in their area. And I would really commend the professors that gave up their time. See, because they saw and they knew, you know, you want to do studies and get information, you go to college.
Right.
Statistical information states that lack of education, poverty contributes to crime, contributes to poor health, contributes to so many maladies of life. So here you have college professors that knew what part of the cure was, and they didn't say, well, we know what the cure is, you know, I ain't getting paid, I ain't gonna do it. They gave it their own time, and they did it for free, for gratis, to help him and others so that they didn't have to come back into that scenario again. You got a long bid. How many priors did you have before that?
One.
One?
Yeah. This was my second felony. The sentencing guidelines stated I could be sentenced anywhere between 8 and 25 years. My first offer was 25 years. And I copped out to 15, of which I served 13.
Did you hurt your victim?
No.
Now,
I mean,
you weren't a
physically,
three-time loser.
emotionally, I imagine.
He was
You weren't a three-time loser.
He was a second felony offender predicate.
Yeah.
Second, right. And our young people need to understand, and some of this maximum sentencing came from Bill Clinton. He's the one that came up with this idea in the scenario. I was just thinking of a case I had just before I retired. I arrested a young 17-year-old fella for armed robbery, attempted robbery, and homicide.
Homicide?
Homicide, and he was not the shooter. He got 17 years at age 17. You know, and it was a very unfortunate scenario for him. I mean,
accomplice.
The fact that he and his buddy went out to rob somebody to get some money, and his partner pulled the gun out and capped the guy.
Was his partner caught?
Oh, I got both of them.
Okay.
It took me all of about 4 days.
Did they get any money?
No. They got away with nothing. You know, and when I sat them down, I said, well, you know, after the shooting, the two of you went down this street and you were talking about blah, 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 this, that, and the other, and then you went, he said, well, how'd you know what we were talking about? He said, that's what I do. This is after 12 midnight, the day after Christmas. You know, in Bed-Stuy. I said, but my job is to get the information, and that's how I got you. But we sat and talked, and we talked about the fact that this young fella that they killed, there was nothing he could do about that at that point. But my question to him was, what are you going to do with your life when you get out?
Right.
And that you have to determine now as you're going in, because if you don't have a purpose for your life after prison, you're not going to make it.
That's key.
All right. Well, I'm going to take you back to prison and just show this one video that we have. It's 4 minutes long. And this is the harsh part of being inside. You're going inside a box, inside a box.
Yeah.
All right? Just play this other clip. We'll come back to you.
Oh, it's torture. I think it's about as torturous as you can get. I did altogether 26 years in prison. The first 5 years was spent going back and forth in the shoot. My longest term in there without break was, I think, 24 months. It was horrible to set a man inside a closed structure for years on end. Man, that's an atrocity, man. You're trying to destroy a human being.
I was a person that was incarcerated for 18 years, and out of the 18 years, I would say I spent about 5 years in solitary confinement, 2 years straight at one time and off and on. And the treatment that I received there and what I witnessed of other people was just inhumane.
I served 9 years in the New York State prison system and was sent to solitary confinement. It's a horror movie.
My son is in Pelican Bay State Prison. He's in the security housing unit. His total time, consistent straight through in solitary confinement has been 14 years now.
You start hearing your own heartbeat. I would lay in my bed and just squeeze like my whole body just to feel something.
I did a total of 3 years altogether in solitary, with the longest stint being about 10 months straight. You have people dying in solitary. You have people committing suicide. You have people dying from heat in solitary. These are real issues that are happening right now, right here in our soil. It's not just happening, in another country. This is happening right here, right now. People being tortured. People are allowing it to happen, not because they agree, but because they simply just don't know about it.
Solitary confinement is a product of, as well as a contributor to, the mass incarceration of people that is happening around our country. Incarceration in this country is unprecedented for this nation and for any nation. We have 1/4 of the world's incarcerated people, even though we only have 5% of the world's population. This is unprecedented. This is a racialized system of social control that has followed a long line in this country, from slavery to Jim Crow segregation to ghettoization to now incarceration. And solitary confinement is a manifestation of that.
What happened to me in prison should not have happened, but it did. And because of that, I feel like the 18 years that you took from me and they messed me up and left me with the mental illness, I will spend the rest of my days being an advocate for the people that cannot speak. But what has happened to me, I will not allow to happen to anybody. And this is how I spend my days, trying to make a difference.
It's going to take a mass movement of the people. There's just so many things that every single person can do in making a difference.
So we still are using the same principles that as a society we have said we've stepped above, that morally we're beyond doing, torturing people, beating people, whipping people. This is not for one particular religious organization. This is not for one person's view of a higher power. This is for all humanity to say from a human rights level. We cannot let humans be furtherly damaged by a system that we control, and we have the power to change that.
Fascinating. You know, I purposely didn't watch the whole thing, and when you came in, I said, where have I seen that guy? That was hysterical. I didn't mean to bring in laughter on such a serious topic. But this is, it's been going on quite a while here, and it's, so what do we do? We see what she said she was going to do. She would never let it happen to another. So this is what you're dedicated to.
Yeah.
This is your organization. So between you and Victor and I see each other every Saturday, and we're working with National Action Network. And, you know, the great work that Reverend Sharpton does with anti-police violence. But once you're caught and put in these situations, so how do you reach the young kids? I mean, I'm sure seeing something like this can help. But what sort of programs do you have out there for people that are coming out of prison or people who have gone mad in these holes that they're put in?
Well, I'll just give a brief.
How much time has you spent in solitary?
Oh, intermittently, over the course of a period of time, a couple of years.
Okay.
And, you know, even I didn't spend as much time in solitary confinement at one time as Johnny did, but even for the minuscule amounts of time that I did spend it, you know, 30 days, 60 days, 90 days, that was enough to really, you know, madden me. But like Johnny,
Did you go crazy?
No, I didn't really go crazy. I really went inside myself, and I had some real crazy thoughts about some things, and you know, but I was able to hold on, and you know, like Johnny, I held on to the fact that one day I'm gonna get out, but I have to be able to be healthy enough to get out. And to me, that was like a motivator for me not to lose my mind, to lose all sense of reality, which actually solitary confinement does impose upon you, and was able to maintain some semblance of fortitude that helped me make it through my periods of solitary confinement. And as Johnny pointed out, you have people in solitary confinement that's been there for decades, 10, 20, 30, 40 years and more. In some cases, and in some instances, people, you know, perish in solitary confinement. But just to speak to your question, I'm a member of the Campaign for Alternatives Against Isolated Confinement, as is my colleague, and that is definitely one of the campaigns that is addressing and campaigning for the abolishment of solitary confinement in New York State.
So how can we help? How can we help?
I'm going to let my colleague, Brother Johnny Perez, speak a little bit more on that there, but I have other campaigns that I would like to, you know, bring to the public's attention, but I'd like him because he's sort of like our spokesperson for the CAKE campaign, you know, although we're both part of the same campaign, we both speak. I'd like him to really give a little bit more insight into that because he's a little bit more involved.
Well, I mean, we're all spokespeople, but one of the things that we're currently looking at is it's called the HALT Act. And then let me say the HALT Act.
HALT Act. Okay.
Humane Alternatives to Long-Term Isolated Confinement. That's what the acronym stands for. And it limits the amount of days that a person can spend in solitary confinement. Recently, the United Nations Rapporteur on Torture declared that anything over 15 days is considered, you know, humanely, it's torturous for an individual. 15, yes.
Anything over.
in New York, and as well as other states states throughout the country, we lock people up for, days, months, years, decades. So it limits the number of days that person can spend in solitary to 15 days. That's number one. Two, it limits the the populations that can actually go into solitary confinement. As it stands right now, anyone can go to solitary confinement with a few exceptions. Pregnant women and people who have diagnosed or documented severely mental illness. Right? And the Shultz Cruiser law did that for us around 2003, I believe.
I mean, if you're crazy, they won't put you in solitary.
Well, if they're people living with mental illness, that's what we try to. That's the kind of language we try to use. But the act also kind of widens that net to people who are over 65 years of age, teenagers. Currently we place teenagers in solitary. We see some progress in Rikers Island, a little bit of progress, but as it stands in New York State, when I say teenagers, 16, 17, 18, 19-year-olds are still being placed in solitary for long periods of time.
They really go crazy.
Well, studies show that the brain is not fully melanated until the age of 25 or beyond. So what are we doing when we purposely isolate somebody and put a person where he is being sensorily deprived for not only days or hours, but for months at a time? And if you stand in the cell and you be quiet, sometimes it gets so quiet that you can hear your heartbeat. Sometimes it gets so loud that people will scream just to hear some type of sound. So you find people screaming, rapping, yelling, crying, and you'll find yourself going to sleep to the cacophony of different voices of different men just trying to make noise, because we have that social need to interact. Like as you were saying earlier, like you can't we're social creatures. That's why a hug feels so good. Regardless of where it might be coming from, it might just feel good to be hugged. And people in these instances for years at a time without being hugged. I wasn't hugged for years.
And you sort of like get back when people.
Yeah, and there's that hesitation, but just to speak briefly about the bill again, so people say, well, if we don't have solitary, what are we going to do with the most dangerous people? What do I do with a guy who cuts another guy, or who cuts a correction officer, right? And what we suggest, or what we trying to put forth, is that the difference between separation and isolation. We understand that there are people who will be needed to be separated from the general population, but that does not mean that we have to place them in an inhumane environment. So it's like we treat people inhumanely to teach them that they shouldn't treat other people inhumanely. It's like the death penalty. We kill people to teach people that you shouldn't kill people. It's a circular argument, right? Because that speaks more about us as we see ourselves as a society than it does the person that we're punishing. So what we're suggesting is creating what's called the rehabilitation units, where people are placed there and they're receiving treatment, they're receiving anger management if they need it, they're receiving education of some sorts. As it stands right now, people are not receiving these services while they're in solitary. There's no drug, alcohol, substance abuse programming in solitary. So if Victor goes to the box for receiving a dirty urine, for testing positive for whatever drug, and he gets a year, why is he not being given alcohol and substance abuse treatment while he's there?
You're telling me you can get a year in solitary confinement?
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And here's
smoking a joint or something?
Yeah, and here's another
exactly
point.
What I'm telling you.
That there is no judicial oversight in solitary confinement. So the discretion of how much time you go to solitary confinement is basically on the people that you sit before, who determine that you're going in solitary confinement and for how much time. So you can be in solitary confinement for indefinite amounts of period of time, because there is no judicial oversight whatsoever, and it's left totally to the discretion of the facility's hearing officer, sergeant, captain, so forth and so on. So you go to solitary confinement for any reasons that they feel is necessary for you to be in solitary confinement. And like he said, it doesn't necessarily have to even involve any violence, threats of violence, anything. You can go for a minuscule infraction of the prison rule, looking at a correction officer, and what you're looking at, next thing you know, you're in solitary confinement. You didn't stop on the line. You're in solitary confinement. You didn't eat all your food. You're in solitary confinement. So there is no judicial oversight whatsoever. It's totally
the correction officer said.
Your word against theirs.
That is really unbelievable that there is no protocol, no written protocol by the New York State Department of Correction for wardens, deputy wardens, or anybody sitting on these panels with regard to infractions. We have laws against unjust
punishment.
Excessive punishment. You said that you tested positive.
Yeah.
I want to go back and ask you, if you tested positive for marijuana, and I know drugs exist within the prison system.
More so in there than any place.
I mean, I've locked up guys who were transporting. They were on work release, and they were going out and they were bringing stuff back in. But also, I arrested a former correction officer who was fired for bringing drugs into the facility. So if you're testing positive for marijuana, is there any investigation to determine where you got the marijuana?
Well, that's a very good question, right? And we can look at, I mean, we can look at the recent news how, you know, officers have been caught smuggling drugs into Rikers Island, being that we're in New York. We can talk about that.
Yeah.
But the short answer is no. You know, the longer answer is the solutions that these people that the system, or I guess the powers that be, try to create in order to stop the drug use or stop the smuggling of drugs inside of the prison is completely misguided. So one of the things that the mayor is trying to do is limit the visitation of the people who are being detained on Rikers Island, right? Limit their physical interactions, so on and so forth, trying to quote unquote lower the smuggling rate inside the jail. But yet, the people that are constantly being caught bringing drugs inside the jail are correction officers.
Right.
Yeah.
And you know, recently they did, I forgot which journalist, but they went undercover and actually they saw how, you know, people walking through McGometers not being checked, not being stopped at checkpoints. Right. You know, and the person walked inside the jail with all kind of things and they say, "Here, I'll get this in here." You know, so it's not necessarily family members or the person's daughter who's coming to visit and that's bringing him or her drugs. I bought mine from another person that was also incarcerated. I don't know where he got it from.
Outside.
But when we look at, well, you know, I mean, there's a possibility it could have went either way.
You know what I mean?
But I think, but the larger question, right, when we talk about drug use in prison, specifically as it relates to solitary, in the investigative process, according to the directive, the urine is supposed to be checked twice. If it tests positive twice, they dispose of the urine, and then they bring you up on charges. The problem with that is that even in a court of law, my most basic fundamental right is the right to due process. So that means that I have the right to admit any kind of evidence that I want on my behalf in my defense. So if you can think a little bit and say, well, you know what? I wasn't getting high. It was Victor who was getting high. How can I prove that? Well, why don't we do a DNA test on the urine to show that, yeah, it might have been positive, however, that urine did not belong to me, and there was a mistake made. I would like to submit a DNA test on the urine. But yet they come back and say, well, I'm sorry, we've already disposed of the urine.
See, and that's a violation of the rules of evidence and chain of custody.
And see,
you don't destroy evidence in any matter.
And see, here
Is that happen, or was that game?
That was my personal experience in 2011 when I received 6 months.
Is it game, or did it actually happen?
No, this is a real, true case story I'm giving you from my personal experience.
That you tested positive.
Yes, in 2011.
And it
that's
wasn't
exactly
your
what
urine.
happened. Exactly.
And it wasn't your urine.
And it wasn't. In this case, now to be clear, I've tested positive in the past for urine for marijuana, and I was using. But in this particular moment, in 2011, I tested positive for opiates, or they said I tested positive for opiates, and I'm like, that is not my drug of choice. Number two, I haven't gotten high in 2008. Was the last time that I smoked any kind of weed at all, and cigarettes. But the individual that I went with, you know, I strongly believe that person was, you know, indulging in those kind of activities. And I said, look, I am not getting high. I'm going to college. I'm 4 hours away from home, which is a real big feat when you've been living 10 hours away from home, right? And I'm also eligible for a 6-month time cut due to my sentencing, right? And I'm also a leader inside of the prison system. I'm doing seminars for colleges that are coming in. I'm teaching classes. I'm hosting. I work in a law library. Like I'm actively participating in the population, and yet I couldn't present that piece of evidence. And when I presented character evidence, they completely disregarded it and wanted evidence to the urine.
How are you? Who set you up?
I don't know.
Somebody snitch?
Yeah, it doesn't work that way. It's just you get the ticket, they bring you down there, find you guilty, they take you right.
You have
to the
suspect of
max.
who did it?
I mean, I don't think that it was purposeful. I think that there was a mistake and the urines get mixed up because sometimes they'll come and they'll do like a raid in the house and they'll test 70 people's urine at one time. So is there a possibility that maybe a urine got mixed up somewhere? Yeah, we're human. We're not infallible. We're not perfect. You know, and then with the machine, if you don't clean it right, if you don't calibrate it right, there's false positives. There's a whole lot of other things with that. But my defense was a DNA result of the urine to show that the urine, although it may be positive, does not belong to me. My DNA is on file because I have a violent crime.
And let me just jump in because I know, Graham, and you did mention about the due process and the directives, and yeah, they do have this here, but do they follow this? Very rarely, with regards to procedural mandates, with regards to the operation of correctional facilities, just like they give you at your orientation when you're first received in a facility, an inmate rule book that gives you a point by point what the facility's rules are, what can happen for any infraction of these rules, and yada 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 yada. Now, do they actually follow this here? They are an entity upon them own selves, and although they do have these directives, as you pointed out, situations, they follow what they choose to follow because what? You are behind the wall. Nobody knows what happened behind the wall. So, and I just want to just say this quickly because if I don't get this out, like I say, I won't feel good. So we talk about mass incarceration, the prison slave industrial complex, what needs to be done, what is being done, and what we as a people, because the Constitution allegedly was written by we the people. It is we the people who have the power to change the laws. Now there are campaigns that are addressing this criminal prison slave industrial complex that the community definitely should be involved in. More people should become more educated and more people should be participating in helping to change the conditions with solitary confinement, with the parole process, with people being aged in prison, with people being sick and dying in prison. And there are campaigns that we are a part of that are actively pursuing this endeavor. The HALT bill, which is part of the campaign for alternative to isolated confinement. Okay, we have the Release Aging People in Prison campaign, which is addressing those of them that are aging and old in prison that no longer poses a threat to our communities, and they are consistently holding people in prison well past their minimum periods of incarceration, which is a crime and is immoral in itself. So there's parole campaigns that are out here, the Safe Parole Act, which is addressing and trying to get the parole procedures changed that will get people out of prison who have served their minimum periods of time, who have made some accomplishments, who have acquired some credentials, who have proven that they are ready to return to society, and the parole board says the same thing over and over again. You can't go home because of the nature of your crime. As we know, will never change from now to the end of time. But this is what parole is doing. This is why our prison population continues to grow, because you have everybody coming in and nobody's going out. But there are campaigns that are doing this to reform this.
How many examples do you have that you can really think about that people have gotten out after a long period of time and haven't gone back because of the situation out here, which got you in there in the first place, and you spent all that time in prison? We can speak of one that we had on the show the first time.
Right.
This is Wesley, and Wesley spent 24 years in prison and came out, and he's a model citizen now.
Well, here's and someone that I'm connected with, and a gentleman, he did 33 years. He actually is the lead organizer for the rap campaign Release Aging People in Prison campaign, and he's came out and he's been doing some amazing work with the criminal injustice system, employed and doing some things, and came up and organized this campaign to address this broken parole system that continuously allow people to stay in prison long past their minimum periods of prison. You get 25 years, you know, the judge sentenced you to, not the parole board. So you go to before the parole board, and now they hit you with another sentence. Now the parole board is going to hit you for every 2 years, so you can go back repeatedly. And because the parole board says, regardless of what credentials, what certificate you have acquired, what improvement that you have made from the period of time that you went in prison, they say to you, no, Mr. Victor, you've been in prison for 30 years. You was given 25, but now you've been in prison 30 years, okay, and you have all these credentials, you have all these people that give character reference, even the correction officers write letters for people going to parole, and they say, because of the nature of your crime, we're not going to let you go home.
Yeah,
that's crazy. A shame, and it's immoral.
Yeah, what state legislators are backing these bills? Can you give us?
So Senator Perkins is one.
Definitely.
Oh, good. Out of our very own Harlem.
Right.
He is a huge supporter of the HALT Act.
Oh, that's good.
He has been very outspoken about it.
Oh, good.
Mr. O'Donnell,
O'Donnell.
Yeah, O'Donnell also has been a huge supporter. Recently we went to Lobby Day up in Albany, and you know, people came out in droves, you know, saying we need to pass this bill. You know, people need to support it.
Senator Valmanette Montgomery,
Brooklyn.
Yes, strong proponent. Senator Aubrey.
Let's do this for our next show. All right. I like to get in touch with some of these states. Senator Perkins be a classic example. You know, he knows Eminem quite well, and we could maybe Skype him in. And then we talk about this because this is a serious issue here.
It is.
And from what I've seen today, man, we got a lot to talk about.
Yeah, we need to talk about this more.
Anytime, I mean, if I was to have any kind of closing thoughts, it's for people to realize that anytime you have a system that increases the likelihood that people will reoffend, then that system has failed.
Right.
Because the purpose of prison, you know, is to correct, you know, hence the name correctional facility, or try to rehabilitate or restore people back to capacity. But if the prison system makes me worse, or if it raises the likelihood that I will reoffend and commit another crime, it places everybody in danger. This is not just a problem that's over there.
Right.
Because when a person decides to reoffend, we don't know who, to what degree, where. So it affects everybody in every community. And we need to do that.
The community.
There's people being released from solitary after years directly into society. Directly into society without being treated, without any medications, without any services. This is an issue. This is an everybody issue. It's not a black issue. It's not a white issue. It's an everybody issue. Although it affects disproportionately people of color.
We got 30 seconds left. And gentlemen, it's my pleasure to do this show today. I mean, I've been touched. I mean, the first time both of these bring you to tears to watch this happen. And we're going to follow up on this one we just saw with the kid. There's another portion, another 6 minutes. We'll find out the next show we do on this, you know, what happened because this is everybody's story. The God in me loves the God in you. And thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Where's my hug, man?
Yeah.